That's at all. Yes, absolutely. Our teachers have those conversations. And one other thing with EL proficiency, in the previous accountability system, students, English language learners, didn't have to test after 11 semesters. Well, we could exclude them. We excluded them reporting for 11 semesters. So 5 years. This became a really pretty prominent flashpoint during the deliberations politically about this accountability system. It's now 3 semesters. And then frankly, I had a conversation with the EL teacher who said, I feel like this new system actually gives me more credibility in my work with students because, especially with our EL students, who tend to have a higher proportion of transient to the population. 11 semesters, you're basically timing for yourself. And that's not fair to anybody. So it's now 3 semesters. But on the other side of it, too, you've got to make sure you're doing the work. And that's what you're doing.
Okay, if I keep going.
This is great discussion.
Yeah. So the other thing before we leave this slide, you all heard me say a million times that notion of the marginalized students kind of on either end of the bell curve, and that's where I think this is another benefit of a system like this, is it really does incentivize high achieving students and their performance, and it also incentivizes students that may not meet the state benchmark that year, but ensuring that their progress is monitored and equally important, knowing that over multiple years of strong growth, they can get to the point where they meet that state benchmark. And so, as Dr. Armstrong described, that I was a principal in the early 2000s, focus was in the median part of the bell curve, those bubble kids, because you were just trying to get the kids you could get to pass, which inherently marginalizes those high achieving kids that everybody knows are going to pass, and frankly, the students that everyone knows probably isn't going to pass this year. So this is, to me, this is a huge improvement. Growth, as I mentioned, growth in this accountability framework is growth in the areas of reading and math that really does factor past SOL performance, a predictive measure of where students should be in years upcoming. There's, Sean maybe can explain more about that. The long and short of it is it's really taking an achievement measure at the state level and turning it into a way to measure growth.
Are we still doing the math testing?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that in a second, and I will continue to encourage us to do that because that is an assessment built to measure individual student growth. I would argue that this is good, but the state system is really built to measure achievement, and they're looking at past achievement. It's kind of the way we would think about a pre and post test in a lot of ways. The state measure of student growth, looking at 3rd grade reading to 4th grade reading to 5th grade reading, there's value in that. But math brings so much more to the table than state measures.
It equips our teachers with a lot of information too, as they're working with this throughout the year. I will put another asterisk in that is VBOS, which is the system that is maintained to measure state growth. It's not funded in the recent budget. They're still going to have to, the state's going to have to measure growth one way or another. I don't know if they'll do it internally, I don't know if something will come from the skies for the next legislative session, but we'll see where that lands.
Dr. Driver, on this growth piece, the state is going to measure growth comparatively between year-over-year SOL testing. To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, the SOL test isn't dynamic. It's not evolving as I'm taking it.
Correct.
The Lucas of genius in French. So it's really capping what you could see as my potential.
Absolutely.
It kind of wedges in growth. It kind of wedges in achievement growth.
It seems like it's got a lot of blind spots, and I get that it's an evolving system, but I agree that math continues to be valuable.
Love that. Readiness, the blocks in the upper right. Is there a question? Good. Blocks in the upper right-hand corner, those chronic absenteeism and then the smaller 4 squares underneath it, those are the factors that contribute to readiness. They factor in those ways. Chronic absenteeism impacts all levels, elementary, middle, and high. We'll talk about chronic absenteeism in a minute. And then you can see the performance task will impact elementary, middle. I'll swing back to that in a second. Advanced coursework impacts middle school only. It's really in the area of math. And then high school, it's the graduation rate and the 3D framework that we're going to dig in here in a minute. The performance task has not been developed yet at the state level, so I mentioned that to the board in my previous presentation. That did not impact any school division in Virginia this past academic year. It's likely not to impact any school division this coming year because we haven't received a performance task yet from the state. I suppose there's an outside chance that it's delivered, but my guess is the performance task will probably wait until the 26-27 school year. And then the other impacts are the ones that are there.
What are the 5 Cs?
You hear them described in lots of different ways. Some of the 5 Cs that you hear: creativity, communication,
Communication.
Okay, here we go.
It's really important.
Critical thinking, collaboration, communication, citizenship, and creativity.
And you might hear 6 or 7. There's usually a couple more. So again, to summarize, those are the impacts at each academic level. We're going to get to goal setting in just a second. Those are the weights, again, for each of those. So just to recognize that there is some variance in how each indicator is weighted at each academic level. And then this is really kind of what the public is going to pay attention to, right? What is the headline for schools? It really is that this accountability system gives schools a score out of 100 points, which is kind of what we're all used to with academic grading. And then for each of those 100, those categories within the 100-point designation, there is a title. And so for anyone that scores 65 to 79 points, that school is considered off track. Schools that score 80 to 89 points, that's considered on track, and 90 points or above, that's considered distinguished. We don't need to worry about the needs intensive support category of Goochland. But that's where those points come from, those circle graphs that I showed with the different weighting. We talk about readiness, we talk about growth, we talk about mastery. That's what contributes to this, that gives each school a score out of 100 points. So that really is the headline. So we're going to jump into academic goals, and as Dr. Armstrong described, we spent a lot of time this summer talking about what makes sense based on the accountability framework for us to be considering setting goals around. What's important to Goochland beyond the accountability framework for us to set goals around, and then obviously we want the board's input today so we can start to solidify these going into next school year. Obviously, it's easy for us to think about these in terms of the 3 academic levels, our 3 elementary schools, our middle school, and our high school. And so what we are proposing focusing on are those 5 categories: accountability, mastery / achievement, achievement / mastery. I know I pontificated at one board meeting about my take on the term mastery. So if we're good, and for now we'll call it mastery / achievement, or achievement / mastery. Growth, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about math to Ms. Allen's point. Readiness and graduation. Those are the 5 overarching areas that we are considering and we want the board's input on goal setting for this year. And I'm going to jump right to the goal setting and then get conversation going. We'll dig in and really at each one. This is where I'm hoping that this will be more conversational than me presenting. But I wanted to start us someplace with this, and this is a result of the conversations we've had this summer. Again, accountability would be those school performance scores, right? Out of 100 points, where do we want our schools to be in relation to that on-track, distinguished categories? That's what we're thinking about in terms of accountability. Achievement, SWOT pass rates. We're used to that. There's a lot of value in measuring achievement, and so we want to talk about SWOT pass rates. Growth, a little bit of deviation. I think we believe in that and the data that it provides, a 10+ year track record of it. While we will get growth contributions to our accountability score through the state system, we believe we will be better off with our own internal goal setting and measuring using the MAP assessment. And we feel like if we show strong results with that more dynamic, individualized assessment, as well as the traditional achievement pass rates, then the growth measures at the state level will follow. And then readiness, chronic absenteeism, that's an easy one to talk about and to measure. The 3D framework is much more complicated. We'll dig in on that in a minute. And then graduation, again, is fairly self-evident. So we're gonna take each one of these individually for discussion, but I'm just gonna start us all off for the sake of efficiency to say, this is kind of what we're thinking right now. We'd love, obviously, for the board to weigh in. So for accountability, we again dug in significantly principals. Our goals for this upcoming year, we have all 5 of our schools within that distinguished category. For achievement mastery, to have our goals be, we think about goals as, throughout this conversation, as aspirational nature. We want it to be a goal that's going to push us, but to recognize at the end of the year, if we fall short of that goal, it's an opportunity to talk about why, strategize a roadmap forward, but not to lower expectations. And so, and some of this we'll dig into on past performance. Board members, you're well versed on our past performance at the very least the last couple of years. Ms. Allen certainly even more than that. But we feel good about that 85% pass rate as an aspirational goal. We'll talk about that some more as well. But again, I want your input. Growth, this is always that big kind of mind shift. You see 60%, I think, what you need 60%. It's a normal reference assessment. Matt would say we should be at 50% of our students meeting their growth goals from fall to spring. The range they give as a target is 40 to 60. So we're proposing setting that bar at 60 or higher % of our students meeting their growth goals from fall to spring. And again, recognizing normal reference, they're compared to all students across the country taking that assessment. So a completely different way to think about goal setting versus that achievement mastery goal. Readiness, we'd like our chronic absenteeism number to be under 5%. And everybody can help me with this. Chronic absenteeism is students that miss 10% or more of an academic year. 10% or more. And in the 3E framework, much harder for us to quantify. We'll pass out something in a minute that will help make sense of it. When we get to that part of the discussions, we'll figure out kind of where we want to go with the 3E framework. And then graduation, I'm going to show it here as a high school only kind of indicator, but I certainly believe and think probably most people in the room, if not everybody, believes the graduation rate is really an indicator of 13 years of work over the course of the student's academic career. So that is absolutely a number that impacts middle and elementary as well. High school has had great success with graduation rate. And we'll look at those numbers in a minute, but we're proposing setting the goal at 98% or higher for our graduation rate. We can talk about 100, we can talk about why maybe 100 isn't the right goal, and we'll dig into that in a minute, get some feedback from Mr. Tom as well. So we're going to start with accountability, and I'm going to take a break and look forward to other folks speaking up. So that is our proposed goal setting going into this academic year, is that this time next year, we would like all of our schools to be within this distinguished range. We don't have official results because this framework is new. We're waiting on finalized results from SQL tests, but Mr. Campbell ran numbers this time last year based on the new accountability framework and based on spring of 04 SQL test results. We have a decent idea of our pass rates right now, but we're still waiting for a little bit of dust to settle. So we don't have this as of today, but this is a great place to start. And if the accountability framework that's going to be in place for this coming year had been in place last year, that's where our 5 schools would be. So you can see the numbers for each school, you can see the categories that translate from those numbers. And again, we're proposing setting our goals at all of our schools being within that distinguished range. And with that, I welcome feedback from the board, conversations from other members here today. Thoughts?
I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Back in the very beginning, you said that 6.5% of schools everywhere
Across Virginia. Yes.
were accredited. When the number bumped up, was it because of the setting easier or because of teaching that better?
So I would go back to my comment, and it feels a little off the cuff, but the notion of copy teaching. I think the reality is you introduce unified state standards and an assessment system that holds people accountable to those standards. It likely took a lot of educators many years to say, I got to stop teaching dinosaurs for 18 weeks because dinosaurs is not a test. I need to start teaching standards. And so I would say that really low number in Virginia was not a reflection of ineffective teachers. They were not teaching the right things. They were not going line to state standards. And progressively, when I talk about the accountability system in Virginia changing every 5 or 6 years, the tests themselves, and principals, everybody can weigh in, I think the tests themselves have gotten more and more rigorous. The accountability system, and Dr. Armstrong talked about the thought behind the current one, I'm excited about this accountability system. The accountability system, Ms. Moses, thinking about your question, I think there's an argument to be made that some versions of the accountability system lowered the bar, raised the bar, lowered the bar. I think there was some variability in the accountability system. But I think the tests themselves, when students are held accountable, when teachers are held accountable, over the 30-year history of Virginia of standards, the tests continue to get more rigorous.
Is it not good nations?
Focusing on what we know is best for our students.
And to be clear, NAEP is administered randomly every 2 years. I don't think Google, have we given NAEP?
Yes.
I mean, it's a handful. So it's a random sample every year that every state, it's administered the same for every state. So I would say that especially right now, the standard setting process that they're undergoing right now, those should be better aligned to NAEP performance coming out of the gate after all that is done. So if we're doing the right things by this accountability system, that's our state should see improvements in NAEP. But it's people criticize NAEP because they say, well, there's only a handful of kids in every state that take this, but it's the same thing in every state, so don't tell me that.
Yes.
So what, yeah, you can say that, sure, but every other state's doing the same thing, and we're still ranked 50th in the nation or 51st behind Puerto Rico. So, I think if we implement our system with fidelity and we are creating our goals today moving forward along the state accountability system, we should be lined up.
Any discussion around this feedback?
So, I'm gonna keep pulling on the NAEP thread a little bit. We're not talking about we were in the middle of the pack, guys. We're bringing up the rear, and this is not a criticism of anyone, but it really begs the question when parents are coming to us locally, they don't care what's happening at the national and the state level. They want to understand how are the standards that their kids are being held accountable to really delivering results. When they see a headline, Virginia is the worst in the country and the territories. So I don't want, I want that to be a motivator for us. And the goals that you put forth, Dr. Geyer, absolutely. We should be reaching for the highest benchmark in every category because to do any less is to fail our students.
I was just asking Dr. Garrison, the scores that you have on the unofficial days, spring outcomes, that does include if there are opt-outs in those schools.
Yes, ma'am.
And Matt, you may have gotten a preliminary outlook on those a couple months ago. And the high school has gone from being on track to which you might notice that because the recent change to work-based learning counting 3D. So we were looking at the results from last year, the high school needs things too. And we'll talk more about that and get through.
And what we don't have, while our focus is on our school division, our kids, our families, we don't have any comparison data to the rest of the state. I mentioned something before. I'm really curious to see high school in particular. I imagine there won't be an overwhelming number of high schools in that distinction category. We'll see, but I think there's a chance that stands out even more when we look at the rest of the state.
If it is a rigorous benchmark, there should not be a lot of schools that are the same category. Right? Otherwise, it's just wrong.
And that's the fundamental shift in this accountability system.
Versus the- I'm curious to know, from, like, how does it make you feel when you see where you are at for Bird and where we're aspiring to be?
I think no matter what my score or what Bird school would have been, I would say Blue Board's going to be better for next year. So, I think I've always said this about Bird, and it always feels like that. Again, short of stick or the poor kids, but and I don't fall into any of those. It's just every year you get better. And some years are going to be better, some years are not going to be as
To
good.
Bird, we turned out good.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. So, and honestly, obviously, I'd love to that to be a higher score, but it doesn't affect me in terms of forward. Every year we go.
Do you think a 90% score is attainable?
I think any score is attainable, but it can take a lot more. And then also it's year to year a little bit sometimes. And sometimes things happen. That's really to answer the question. I think it's attainable. It'll be very, it's a lot of work for it. That's the kind of discussion we'll have. But I also look at any school, not just Bird, that every teacher has their own sense of pride. They want their kids to achieve and do well and be successful. To where if doing well and being successful ends up being passing it so well, leading a rap school, whatever, or just making it through the year with really positive thing. Everybody has their own goal. Teachers have their own sense of pride and be successful. So I want it to be higher, hopefully it will be. Again, this is from the previous year too. So
You can't take accountability for this one.
say that's right. I watched
No shame on it.
Yeah, but,
Maybe higher.
I was saying, I like to go with that and say I was part of the Bird staff there as well. So, yeah, every year.
Would you rather exceed 86.3 and 82? Would you rather, if we had that up there?
Oh, 100%. I would always look at higher. I would like to be 91.
Well, no, I'm talking about for you to be in sync with the other two elementaries.
Are you saying I like it or do you think it's reasonable?
No, you think it's attainable,
Oh, 100%.
so we could change that to 86.3 and you'd be happy.
No, I still want to be 90.
Well,
But
I totally agree.
yeah, I
have.
would always like Bird students and the Bird faculty and the Bird community to be felt to be on equal grounds as everybody else. And I think we are. I think we get the same.
100%.
We get the same opportunities everybody else.
100%.
We have. You could say Randolph has high achieving students. They have students that are strong. Same with Mutual, same with Bird. And so I don't make any excuses for Bird or located
No.
family structures. We got plenty of rich, well-to-do, high
Absolutely.
achieving, supportive families in Bird.
And we approve that we can be above that.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think I'll just add real quick, and this one, we want to weigh in. Steve and I talked about this. When you go to senior awards GHS, and you see the students who walk across the stage getting scholarships and you recognize, then you go to the Bird time capsule, you see a lot of the same kids. And I told Andy this, there are as many Bird kids walking across that stage, honors, going into the workforce, going to the military, going through universities, as there are any other elementary schools. And Andy mentioned something that's important. He said this, and one of the things that happen, nothing we're going to talk about today is in isolation. So when we get to the end of the day today, I know Ms. Robinson mentioned our last meeting talking about account. When you lose 13 or 14 days of the weather, that may have a disproportionate impact on Andy and what he's doing there, maybe because of internet access, like because of resources at home, then it could have teenage ES. I'm not saying that scientifically, but it might. So when we talk about things happening, what can we do to really create contingencies to make sure those things don't adversely impact kids and our teachers? That's all.
Glad you mentioned different factors because like with parent parental support and absenteeism and just how many students that are learning English as a language, those all impact the school community and all the resources that the schools have. So I agree. I think it's 90% is attainable. I think we just need to zone in. I think the important thing when teaching your students that the assessment's a tool for you to know how to help you. And I think for many years we did SOL, I just know that there was a lot of pressure and stress on teachers to perform to get the right score, which then put that stress and pressure on the children. which doesn't help their mindset of going into assessment. Instead of viewing it as, hey, this is just a tool for us to do our job better, so we can help you. So I think that goal going into the new year is finding what things they might have impacted each school. Was it absenteeism? Was it parent involvement? Was it more resources for remediation and tutoring or personnel?
And then more of their classrooms. When we talk about that, we can speak freely here. There are classrooms where teachers might be using, our principals are working with their teachers, setting goals meaningfully and individually, and then the mission of size. We can do that. So we know where those places are. We got to turn it up. So some teams do.
And I have some things that I was going to share later, but I will just allude to a little bit is, you look at the research out there, there's certain things that I feel that we need to incorporate into the classroom at the younger years to